What's up, everyone? We're back with another episode of Locked In with Dylan. I'm your host, Dylan Nadler, and I'm really excited about today's guest. We got fan favorite viral Cutman, UFC Cutman, Brad Tate. Brad, thanks for coming on, brother.
Thank you for having me. So it's an honor.
Of course, of course. I mean, let's jump right into it. You're firefighter slash paramedic turned UFC cut man. I can imagine that
Yes,
it's a
sir.
tough jump. How'd you do that? And is that something that you always had in mind for where you wanted your career to go, or how did you make that shift from paramedic to UFC cut man?
Um, I never, I never thought about it. Like in my wildest dreams, like I never, again, knew that this was something that I could do and I could make money at it. Um, so I definitely loved being a firefighter paramedic. And again, it was just all through life's plan, God's plan. But I literally, um, one of my friends had knew Greg Jackson and Rashad Evans. And I was commuting from Vegas to Albuquerque. And I was flying out, and Greg Jackson and Keith Jardine were going out for when Rashad fought Forrest Griffin. And they were talking to me about it. And again, I'm talking to him, and Greg Jackson was telling me about Rashad cutting weight. And I was like, well, he's sitting in a sauna drying himself out. I was like, well, hey, I can put a couple IVs in this guy if that's something that would help you guys. And of course, Greg Jackson, the genius he was, like, yeah, what? Oh, cool, yeah. So I gave Rashad a couple IVs. The guy went out, performed amazingly, won, and the rest is history. So Greg pretty much would have me out. I did like GSP. I did several fighters, and this was back when it was legal. And so I was around. My personality. I was always around the guys and being myself, and I just was around. And I was like, man, there's got to be something I can do because I was flying to events and I didn't have tickets, but I kind of wanted to watch the show. And then I didn't really have a hotel, so it was just crazy. It was very unorganized.
Yeah,
And so I went to Burt Watson and was like, hey man, how can I get in on this? What can I do? And he's like, what can you do? And I was like, well shit, like I can do anything. Like what can I do? And I was like, I'm a paramedic, so I could naturally would fit being a cut man. And I remember talking to the cut man that was in Corpus Christi, and I asked those guys if they had any training or any kind of licensing. What do they need? And they were like, man, I only had a high school education, and I was telling them that I was a paramedic. And then I remember Stitch that ran basically saying, hey, buy my book. And I was like, what? So, but I just hung around, man. And then Bert finally was like, you know what? You need to learn how to wrap hands. And then I did that, and then I would show up at the gyms with gauze and tape, and I would ask the guys wrap hands. And it was funny because Rashad, who's a brother to me, and I love him the most, I gave him my IV, but the guy wouldn't let me wrap his hands. He's like, so the fighters that were in the UFC was like, what the fuck? Like, so I remember Melvin Gillard was the one guy that was like, man, yeah, you can wrap my hands, because he used to have really bad hands. He would break his hands, so I wrapped his hands, and I would go out there, I would drive to where he was at, or what I was doing, I would come to the gym, and I would wrap his hands. And then Melvin, when we went to the UFC events, he would be like, Bert, I want my guy to wrap my hands. Is that okay? I break my hands like, can this guy wrap my hands? So I did. And then Bert was like, you got to go to these smaller shows. So I did that for several years, and I would fly to Texas, and I'd wrap these shows, man. I would stay in these hotels, and it was crazy. And Bert finally called me up and was like, hey, you got a passport? And I was like, yeah. And he he was like, you got a passport? And I was like, yes, sir. So I flew to Toronto. He put me up in a hotel, and he gave me that old school black uh, t-shirt with the red UFC letters. And bro, I was happy. I don't even think I got paid for that show. I just think I showed up. It was like a mentorship. So I did several years where I would fly to an event. I'd get that little shirt. I'd be in the back, and I'd do red and blue. And finally, I would do red and blue. And then finally I got to wrap the first fight. Whoever was the first fight that night, I would get to wrap one of those guys' hands, and I'd do red and blue. So I did that a long, long time, man. Then finally, Rudy Hernandez was like, man, if this guy's gonna go to the cage, we gotta see if this guy can work. And Rudy kind of vouched for me and got me in, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like a lot of people talk about kind of ready, aim, fire. For you, it was more like ready, fire, aim. Like you just knew what you wanted to do, and you kind of figured out the how afterwards.
Well, yeah, like I said, once I wanted to do it, I wasn't deterred by the work. So like I knew it. That's kind of what I wanted. And Bert was like, "Do this." And so every time I would see him at a shop, like, "Hey, Bert, I worked another small event. Hey, Bert, I went to Albuquerque and worked Jackson's MMA. Hey, Bert, So, and it's just funny, man. Like I got so many stories. I remember working a Jackson's MMA show, and this was up and coming fighters, and Greg and them were like the guys. So, and I remember Rob Monroe. So this firefighter that I knew, Greg Ochoa was no, his name was Mike. It was Mike Ochoa, and he was a MMA fighter, and he was like, oh, and I'll never forget this, man. And I was at Station 15, and I was wrapping this guy's hands all week. And we go to the show, and this dude walks up to Rob Monroe and goes, Mr. Monroe, it would be an honor if you wrap my hands, because Rob
Oh,
was at the UFC at the time. Bro, so I'm sitting there like, and I'm going to be honest, dude, I was a hater. Deep down, I was like, I hope you get knocked the fuck out. I was like,
yeah.
oh my God, I was so pissed. But it was funny because hindsight 2020, I had a guy do that to me. Well, I don't know if it was the contender or what, but the guy was like, oh my God, would you wrap my hands? And I remember his buddy had everything set up. And I was like, bro, listen, I was like, I'm not going to do that because this happened to me. But what I'll do is, if you win and make, I was the contender. I was like, if you make it, I'll do your hands in the UFC. And I was like, okay. And I was like, because I was telling the guy that was doing, I was like, bro, I really had that happen to me. And he was like, he said, no, 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 it's his fight. And it's whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to say. But deep down, you're like, fucker, I just came out here, wrap your hands, you gonna pick somebody else. So but I remember that. There's a lot of stories that where I was coming out, man. I remember people being like, oh, you're in the UFC. And I just remember being like, and now like, like I love when people ask me about like, oh my God, like, can you critique me? I'm like, man, can you critique me? Like, you could be better at this than me. Show me something. So that's a fun thing, man. It really is. So anybody
Yeah.
reaching out to ask me about how to do things, I'm gonna ask you back because I'm trying to steal y'all secrets. you know,
There you go.
there's a
Yeah,
guy
no
out there that's
gatekeeping.
doing. There's a guy out there that's doing this and this like better. So
Yeah, man. What was what was special about that IV experience, like you said, with Rashad Evans, meeting up with them and doing some IV stuff and that being your intro to kind of just MMA as a whole? Like, what was so special about doing that work with them that made you realize, like, man, I want more of this?
it wasn't the first IV wasn't special. It wasn't, but it wasn't even the third. I mean, I met George St. Pierre, and I mean, it was just it took like maybe 3 or 4 months, and then finally I was like, man, this is kind of cool. You go to different hotels. Excuse me.
Bless you.
You go to different hotels. Wow.
Bless you.
Sorry. You go to different hotels, different places. You meet different people. It was just the life on the road, man. And it was just not to say the life of a rock star, but it was just fun, man. You were seeing the world, and I was like, everybody was kind of cool. So it just turned into a family kind of thing where you go in there and guys would be like, and this is when they used to weigh in at 4 o'clock. So guys would be dead tired, man, and they were like hurting. And then you go in there and give them an IV, and they're just like back to normal. They're just like, so at that point, it became when the guys saw you, their faces would light up like kids on Christmas, because they knew like, oh man, this guy's about to save my life,
Yeah.
and that was a cool thing. And so from that experience, the guys being so welcoming, and that was everybody, bro. Like I would be there because you used to have a wristband, and if you wasn't supposed to be there, you wasn't there. But everybody just knew me. They're like, man, come on, man. Hey, can I ride on the shuttle? Like, yeah, get in. Yeah. Hey, where's the hotel? Like, can I ride with you? And people were so nice. And that was the kind of It's not like that now, you know. Like I said, that's why like when I tell people, they ask me how to get in the UFC, I'm like, bro, you can't even do what I did anymore. You can't just go to an MMA gym that you're not a member of and be like, hey, I want to wrap hands and become a cut man. They're gonna be like,
Yeah.
get out of here, you know. So that is really, it's harder now. But I just thank everybody, man. I thank George. I thank Rashad. I mean, Carlos Condit. You the At the time when Jackson's gym was the height of success, I mean, they had everybody, bro. And if they had them, I was definitely giving them IVs. Cowboy, Leonard Garcia, to Cubs. One like, I mean, bro, there's a list of guys that came through that program that when I saw them, I gave them IVs. And then you sort of put me out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have to find a new way to stay with the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny, man. So, anytime it comes to trying a new thing or getting into a new space, I guess, there's always those people that start off and they're just these prodigies. Like the first time they do it, they're just like the goat right away. And it's this magical moment. I heard it, and I want you to tell the story. I was seeing something where you're talking about maybe that wasn't the case for you and the whole Brazilian guy walking out. I want to hear that from you because that sounds like kind of the opposite of a first touch was magic type of thing.
So what are you talking about? Like when the girl got slapped on camera?
No, no, no. The eye poke.
Oh my God, bro. So dude, oh my God, bro. I got so many stories. Y'all will be cracking up at me. So Bert, so Rudy vouches for me. But this time, I don't know how long I'd been with the UFC, but Rudy finally was like, man, we're gonna use this guy now. If we're gonna use him, then he needs to go to the cage. And so Bert has his old scraggly voice, but Bert was just, he was the man. And he just like, he talked to you or whatever. So Bert was like, listen, you're gonna work the first couple of fights. Don't fuck this up. And I was like, so again, I had a little bit of kind of bravado because I was a paramedic. I'm like, bro, like, what are y'all tripping on? Like, I just had a guy get shot. Like, what are y'all talking about?
Yeah.
Like, like, y'all in here working these fights. They call me, those are paramedics over there. I got this, right? So Bert was like, bro, baby, when the lights come on, your lights can't go out. So, and he's right. Like, there's that just are not scripted, and you gotta kind of either have common sense to deal with it. You can't panic. And so the guy comes out, man, and the music's going. I'm here, and I'm replaying Stitch. If y'all ever get a chance to watch Stitch, when he does the Vaseline, man, Stitch is like, I'm telling you, Stitch is like the standard, right? So he's over there doing his thing. I'm like, okay. So this is my moment, bro. This is my moment to shine. Like, I've been waiting for this. This has been a long journey. Like, I'm about to do this. And in my mind, I've made this scenario bigger because it's the first fight of the night. There's the fighters' families, the commission. There's literally like 8 people in this whole arena, right? So, but it's my night to shine, bro. The lights are on. And the Brazilian comes out. I don't remember his name. And this dude doesn't speak a lick of English. And he's vibing to his music that he comes out to. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, stop. And I've done my Stitch invitation. I'm like, I'm ready, bro. I'm about to give it to him. And all of a sudden, he's vibing, and I can't get him to stop. But now that panic sets in because everybody's looking like, bro, like, are you going? So like, hey, like, he won't. And he zigs when he should have zagged, and I was like, ugh. And I mean, bro, I was in there. I ain't gonna lie, I was deep. I was in there. So he goes, oh, and of course he goes back. So at that point, I'm just like, the hell with this grease. Like, I'm like, oh shit. So he goes up in the cage. And Bert looks at me and goes, didn't take you long to fuck that up. And I was like, but thank God the guy knocks this guy in like a minute. He wins and he's still rubbing his eye. And I'm like, unfortunately, next time was kind of like good. But, bro, I got stories about me at that cage, tripping and falling into the cage, dropping my scissors in the cage, bro. So it's a learning experience. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious, man. Talk about, not going the way that you planned it, but I guess that's just what experience is you do something so many times, like you're bound to make mistakes and run into like certain obstacles. And that's kind of what makes you a veteran at this point, all these years later, is, going through the ups and downs of it, not having it be perfect. But I'm sure that's why you're so confident now too. Like, there's not a lot that I haven't seen at this point. So whatever happens, like I could take it on.
That's bro. It was maybe 2 fights ago. I forgot to put that adrenaline on the swabs. Like that's what I'm telling you. Like sometimes you'll get so caught up in the fight, you'll be like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be working. Like like they're like, hey, cut man. I'm like, oh my bad. Like yeah, like what you need, So
Yeah.
again, bro, it's all fun, and I hope you guys don't see it on camera. But oh my god, bro, there's times like I went in there and been like, forgot my inswell. Like oh, let me use my towel, Or there's times I'm chasing a fight around the ring because I'm trying to put the inswell down or wipe him off from blood, or the cool spot now is like that's really I'm not gonna lie to you, is nervous. Is like so I primarily work in the red corner. So when I go in there to work, you know who's looking at me, right? Dana White. So you're literally like your boss is sitting there, and I'm like, oh, the President Trump, former President Trump, Kid Rock, every kind of celebrity, like
Yeah.
the VIPs are right there, like, oh, you're like, hey, like, oh, they can see me, You're trying
Yeah.
not to talk to the fighter, spit on the fighter. You're trying not to get in the way. And I'm a big guy, so now I'm trying to play the count mass game. Like, do I sit in front of the guy? Do I sit to the side? Like, so there's always a lot going on in that minute that you're working. Like my biggest thing is like, and I'm probably gonna make it happen. Is like, don't trip, don't trip. I don't know why lately I've been like, I'm a trip going to the cage. I'm like, just do for this moment, But
Yeah.
it's always something going through your mind when you go in there, man. Like it's the same like when I was a paramedic and you pull up. It's like, okay, I got this. Check. Okay, I got this. So, but again, man, it's a fight and it's live. You never know what might happen.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Talk to me about like the difference in pace, right? Because being a paramedic, still you're kind of working against the clock sometimes, but between rounds, you've got by the time they sit down, 45 seconds maybe to do quick work and then they're back at it compared to maybe having someone for extended care and being able to, take your time with it. Like how was that pace difference and having to work within like 30 to 45 seconds between rounds? Was that something that took a while to get used to? Is it still something that's a high pressure situation? Like what's the difference between that kind of high paced 30 to 45-second work between rounds compared to kind of normal paramedic work where maybe you have them for an extended amount of time?
Paramedic work is definitely important. So the thing is, in paramedic, you can definitely rely on your training, and bad things happen. Correct. The thing with paramedicine is there's not a million people watching.
Yep.
So I what was it? Was it was the Yoel Romero fight where I was accused of putting too much grease on the fighter, and a million people. I say a million, but it probably wasn't. But it was a lot of people that scrutinized that. Which it wasn't the case. But trust me, like everybody in there got the blame. I mean, it was several people in there, but I got the blame for it. And what do you do? So that's kind of the difference in it. I mean, it's definitely fast, but you actually have quite a bit of time. Like, I mean, to be honest with you, like, yes, uh, that's why I like run to the fighter. But that 45 to 50 seconds you have, it's plenty of time for you. I mean, and you do. You just it it's like I don't know, like it's like those professional athletes. I mean, to them it's like yeah, like you see a guy come down with 5 seconds left on the clock. Like a LeBron James gets the ball in an NBA game. 5 seconds is a lot of time. You know what I'm saying? So you use it wisely and you do what you need to do, and then you get out of the way. But I
Yeah.
mean, and again, you're watching. You see what you kind of get an idea of what I need to work on and where I need to go with things. So, but it's definitely pressure filled because the camera's right there. Like it, and that's the thing that I've learned even now is there's always somebody watching. I think they might not be watching. Then next thing you know, they're like, oh, Tate was over there shaking his butt. Oh, like he made a face when the girl got smacked. So now imagine when there's a serious cut and the fight is like, you're like, oh wow, this is. And you feel that. Like, I never want anybody to, I never want to be the reason for anything. Like, um, I always make this analogy. Cutmen are like the yard lines on a football field. You very rarely think about the 50-yard line, and you very rarely think about the 10-yard line, the goal line. But could you imagine playing football without those goal lines or those yard lines? It'd be kind of complicated. So,
Yep.
and that's how I look at it.
Yeah, it kind of keeps it going. Your job is to kind of keep things smooth and operating, but not really be the main attraction at the end of the day, unless you're falling or doing something funny like that.
Right, yeah. But that's the thing too. And like I said, that's the mindset. Like, I love it, and you love having fun, but you don't want to wake up Monday and they say, "Oh, he did this," And fortunately, earlier starts in my career, I've had that. Where I was criticized by Joe Rogan, and it didn't feel well. So
Yep.
you definitely want to be forgotten after the fight.
Right. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. I think for you, what makes you stand out, especially in the field, is just how much you've been embraced by the whole fighting community, all the fighters that go out there, posting with you. And like it seems like you guys really have a cool connection. And I'm sure, and again, you know this space much better than me, but I'm sure that's kind of goes against the grain of maybe what you're told early on, which is I can imagine conversations where people say to new cutmen, like, hey, let the fighters do their thing. You don't need to be too buddy with them. Do your job, stay professional. But, for you kind of have embraced that personality, and that's what has you so kind of popular with them and having fun and building that connection that you wouldn't have been able to. Is that something that early on you got any sort of warnings about, even if it wasn't directly with how you were behaving, just things that people said like, hey, let them be the pros, not your job to be their friend? And how did you kind of decide, like, no, like this is who I am, and if they're going to like me, they're going to like me, but I'm not going to play a role that doesn't fit?
No, man. Again, everything with me is organic. So, um, the fighters are the fighters, man. They're what you want to see. You don't want to see the cut man. And so, um, but I'm also a professional, man. Like, I'm not gonna jeopardize my licensure doing something dumb. Like, I'm not gonna wrap somebody's hands, and there's a commission there. I'm not gonna wrap somebody's hand illegally, and I'm not gonna put grease on there. I'm gonna do the job that I'm supposed to do, and the fighters are professionals, man. They know, they know, hey, this guy's here, and that's it, But the same way that I would treat a guy, a Gilbert Burns, is I would treat that with everybody. I would give everybody the same attention and care to detail that I would give a Gilbert. But it's no different, man. Like, that's the thing. Like, sports brings us together. Like, do you think guys on the NFL really hate each other? Like, no, they're training right now. They're all in these camps training because guess what? These guys play college football together. These guys grew up playing in Pee Wee League and high school football together. So, no, they don't hate each other. Now, they can be competitive, and that's what it is, but it's not, it's not. This is a sport, man. Nobody is out here to really hurt each other, and nobody's out here. So, um, and unfortunately, like, I think everybody knows that, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same hotel together. I mean, these guys come to the fights and they sit next to each other. How can I fight you, but then I'm sitting across from you?
Yeah.
How can I fight you and then train with you? And again, thank God for the UFC because I'm non-biased. Like, I can wrap Gilbert's hand and then go work the corner of the guy that he's fighting. It just happens that way. And the guys, and the thing is, the fighters are all professional. They understand this is a sport.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And just like you said, staying organic, right? I think people can tell when you're not being authentic and you're trying to be something that you're not. And I think for you, that's kind of why you've been, embraced by the whole community, is because you're very clearly yourself, and people can recognize that, which is great. I think for you, you have a really interesting perspective, a really unique perspective, because a lot of the time, you get to see these fighters in the most important moments, right? As you're wrapping their hands, which is a big deal, as they're about to step into the octagon, which is a big deal, post fight, which is a big deal. And, what we do at MindLock, especially, working with athletes on the mental side, everybody has a little bit of a different routine, a little bit of a different attitude as they walk into the ring. I'm sure when it comes to champions and people at high levels, there's a lot of similarities between how these fighters are approaching their fights, and I'm sure there's differences too. So I'd love to hear kind of your opinion, and especially with all your years of experience, what some of those kind of similarities and differences are with those really high level fighters and some of those champions. Are there things that you notice in the back room when you're wrapping their hands as to maybe behaviors that kind of stay true to all of these high level fighters? And if anything, what are differences you notice where maybe some people are a little bit more energized, some people are a little bit more locked in and quiet, some people are dancing, some people are, meditating, some of those like similarities and differences that you've found? I think it's a really important insight.
The thing that I can tell you is, uh, again, this is a sport, but it's a fight. And so if you were going to get into a fight, even though you've trained, you're going to have those same concerns. So you do see the sweaty hands. Does that mean that this guy's going to lose? No, it just means he's human. Um, you have the guy that like sleeps. You have the guy that paces back and forth. You have the guy that's in the back screaming. You have the guy that's talking to himself. But what you see in all of these guys, honestly, is you see the people that are around them. That's what's important. It's the team concept. So even though there's one guy going in that cage, there's a team. There's a guy that he brought with him that got him ready. It's the coach that has the game plan. And as long as those coaches and that team is all focused, then the fighter goes out and does their thing. Sometimes they come up short. Sometimes they're very successful. But at the end of the day, they're human. So, and you see it, you see the first guy fighting in the UFC, he looks like a deer in the headlights, like, oh, wow. And he's been fighting in these smaller promotions and it's this way. And then you get a guy that is an old veteran. I mean, they're all different, man. And you would be shocked at some of the big names that I know that hate to fight. Bro, they literally are like on pins and needles when they get that call. And then there's some that's like another day in the office. So I think the best way to say it is, man, they're human. That's what I see in them, from my walks of being a paramedic and everything. Like, even the ones that just like, I got this and walk out, you're like, oh, interesting, But you see the guys that, sometimes you'll be like, okay, you're nervous, but the guy that's like super hype and like, but they're playing music, man, and we're having conversations like, hey, man, how's your family? Oh, you got kids, and it's weird. Some people are like, man, I don't talk about that. Some people are like, oh yeah, man, look at my baby, and like, it's the back of the house is so fun, man. It really is, because you get that 5 to 10 minutes with that person, and it's personal, bro. It's like, I feel like people would love that fight. Could you imagine getting 5 to 10 minutes with your idol?
Yeah.
What would you do at that time? You know what I'm saying? Like 5 to 10 minutes of talking with one of the most famous people on the planet. What would you do at that time? I guarantee you wouldn't spend it talking about bullshit. You would be like, oh.
Well, I think it's the audio.
Talking to Gilbert.
Oh, we're back.
Okay, are you there?
Yeah.
I love when I talk to Gilbert and I see his boys with the afro, and I see his wife. Like, I love Chito and his daughters and his family. It's amazing, man, and it just. But I love it. Like, that's the only way I can describe it is the love for it, and you see that, But you see a Chris Curtis and like, I don't want to talk about these guys' personal stuff because it's not really, but interacting with those coaches, man, and hey, how's this guy doing? Oh, it's literally, truly a family that fights. That's all I can describe it. That's the best analogy. A family that fights. And in that family, some people like each other, some people don't like each other. But at the end of the day, it's all family.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think that's a cool thing about combat sports is it's technically an individual sport, but it's a whole team dynamic. You can't get far without your coaches and your training partners and everybody every step of the way. So it's one of those unique individual sports that really has that team component. And even to what you were saying, I think is a great point and a great insight about everybody being human, no matter whether you're ranked number one or it's your first fight in the UFC. It's like I think. When it comes to champions and really high level competitors, I think, and this is something I always say to our athletes is champions aren't people that found a way to block out the nervousness, and they don't experience fear and they don't experience anxiety. They just know how to work with it and perform through it anyway. And I think that's something that you probably get to see firsthand. It's not that these fighters are somehow immune to all of those kind of negative emotions that we experience before battle. It's like they feel it the same way anybody else does, but they just know how to manage it and perform through it regardless of that.
Like, and again, man, like I told you, like it's 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 so unique, man. It's a great perspective. It really is. So, you see a guy before he fights, and then you see a guy when he loses, or you see a guy when he wins. Like, man, I mean, a night like UFC 300, man, I'm so excited for it. And everybody's excited for that. But I can tell you, after UFC 300, I'll sleep for a week because
Yeah.
my emotions are gonna be like this, man. From watching the guy win to why, like, you understand, like, somebody's gonna win and somebody's gonna lose, you know. So on one hand, I'm gonna be over there with the guy like, oh my god, and then on the other, I'm like, hey, bro, you're good, you know. And you'll see these guys, man, be human. They're human. They're from just the worry and the, and the thing about fighters that are amazing, they can take the losses, but it's when they feel like they let people down. That
Mm.
that shit right there is just different, you know. And again, that's what I love. That's the part that I love about it, man, because big grown men get to cry, and big grown men are like, like women, men, everybody's in the back, man. And to even, like, man, a guy fights his heart out, and Dana will literally come back and talk to that guy. Hey, man, like, it's so much emotion around the UFC. It's a powder keg. And that's the part that, like, I hope the fans really understand. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's so that arena is filled with raw emotion, even from the fan standpoint. You watch the fighter fight, and he's your countryman fighting. You know what I'm saying? And he wins, and they were cheering on their countryman, but if the countryman got beat, they cheered on the guy that won. Like, they just wanted good spectator. It was a great crowd, bro, and they wanted their countryman to win, but they also realized when he didn't, and there was no booze. It was like, okay, cool, and that's the part about MMA, man. And I think too, that's why sometimes you see the fights happen. You got alcohol, you got emotion. This guy won, this guy didn't. No, like, bro,
Yeah.
it's amazing, bro. It's amazing, like, to get that much emotion in one area at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. It's a crazy environment, and it's a lot of energy, and it's just about focusing that into the right channels. But I think for you too, going back to the mindset of things also, you see a lot of these fighters at the last point before they walk into the ring. So at the time that you see them and you're wrapping their hands and all of that, like, physically they are not getting any better in those next 15 minutes. They're not going to get faster, they're not going to get stronger, their cardio isn't going to improve. By the time you see them, it's all kind of mindset up until that point. Like you said, managing those nerves, managing those kind of fears that we all kind of go through. Talk to me too, at least from, even if it's just your insights through all those years, like, how important is the mental side of the competition, especially when you see people who are all kind of physically at their peak, at the best that they can be, but like you said, only one person gets to walk out as the winner. How do you find, at least too, from your experience and your insights being just around the fight game for so long, where does the mental component kick in, and why do you think that's so important to the game as well, along with the physical prep?
Well, that's everything. That's, like, I mean, if you want to, like, I know what your business is, and, like, even talking to mental, like, dude, that's anything. That, like living life. Life is not easy. It's not. So, do you have it to get up every day? Like, my grandfather used to tell me, man, getting old, it takes a man to get old. And that was some of the truest things I've ever heard. Like, I'm not 20 anymore, man. I can't stay up all night and then run around. Like, so even from the fighter standpoint, I would assume, like I said, man, to do this is tough because guess what? Like, you don't know what's going to happen in that cage, and to still make that walk. So, you know, only a few can do that, and I guarantee you, just that alone, man, is and there's a lot riding on it. Like, there's a lot riding on it. This guy's younger. This guy's this, and I can't discuss from that point, but what a fighter feels, I can just tell you about life. So every day in life, you know, I'll be honest with you, wrapping these guys' hands, I've wrapped several of them, but do I worry when they go out there like, oh, did I do something wrong with the wrap? Is his hand going to hold up? Does he feel comfortable with the? Because again, you never want you to be that guy. You know, like I would hate to, man, like come out and my fighter has a cast on. Like, oh shit, like, dude, what happened? You know, or oh, this was already injured. Why didn't you tell me? Oh, I didn't want, you know. That's why I told you, like after the fights, man, I gotta sleep because it's such an emotional roller coaster, and it's mental. You know, like again, becoming popular with Instagram, like man, you think that's easy, and everybody went, oh, I'm not gonna say it sucks. I definitely like it, but man, like to tell everybody hello and then miss somebody, and then that person says you're a piece of crap, you know, or to be on social media and not be ripped up next to these guys and have somebody call you fat. Um, it's hard, you know, because everybody has an opinion now about me. You know, oh, you're just Gilbert's bitch. Okay. Oh, you're a fighter fluffer. So, uh, it's a cruel world we live in, man. There's people that have things like when that when that Joe Rogan thing. So, to be very honest with you, man, like my grandfather used to tell me, "How do you harpoon a whale?" So I ask you that question: how do you harpoon a whale?
How do you what?
How do you harpoon a whale?
How do you harpoon a whale? It's a good question. I would say, I don't know. Let me think about it. I don't want to give you a rushed answer.
It's a very simple answer.
You got to
You
be
harpoon him when he
you got to
comes
be
up for air.
accurate. Say it again.
You help you harpoon him when he comes up for air.
Okay.
So now that I've reached 100,000 followers and now I'm here, bro, like everybody's not happy for me, you know? So you have to deal with that. Like I have to walk around knowing like this guy hates me. This guy wants my spot, you know? Um, and of course that's not in my immediate area. I would hope not, but bro, there's people out there that don't like me. There's people out there that think I suck, you know? My life gets torn apart. There's people that look at me. I had a guy on Instagram that was trolling me that brought up something, and I was like, oh, like, so again, that plays into the mental thing, like, you know, and again, I've tried to be very fair, but you know, you, I'm not saying people are mean or cruel, but they can be. That's why, again, like I said, man, when you reached out, hey, do you want to do this? Of course. Like, I want to be that guy that people are like, you know what? I had a good experience with this guy, you know? And unfortunately, there's sometimes, bro, I'm less than stellar. There's sometimes people get on my nerves and I might say the wrong thing, but hell, there was something yesterday I said that I thought was funny, and man, jeez, I was on the plane for hours, like getting criticized for it. And I was like, I didn't mean anything harmless by it. I was just thoughtless when I said it.
Yeah.
But that plays on you. And, you know, imagine you can't win on the internet. So imagine 100,000 people telling you suck. You know, imagine, you know, people ask you how to become a cut man, and you like, man, it's probably not gonna happen. But you know, if you got the wherewithal and you think you can do it, and you got 20 years or 15 years to try, then I'll help you.
Yeah.
You know, but but that's the everyday life of grind, man. That's you. That's getting old. That's what it is. That's life. You know, like if you want to be the best at something, you got to be prepared to offend people. You got to be prepared to hurt people's feelings. You got to be prepared for people to be envious or jealous of you.
Yeah.
And can you handle that? You know, like you see it all the time in MMA. There can only be one champion. And guys that don't like you, the guys that don't have an issue with each other, for that piece of gold, I'm not going to say they turn on each other, but you've seen what happens.
Yep.
So when you bring up the mental aspect, I don't like using athletes. I don't like using people. You know, like, you know, every kid wants to be a professional athlete. And it's so limited. You know, not everybody can play in the NFL. There's 32 teams. But You can go to college and become a doctor. You can go to college and become a lawyer. You can be successful. You don't have to be a professional athlete. You don't have to be a cut man. You know, you can be in social media. You can help fix the cage. You can drive the trucks. You can do lighting. You can do production. You can be the paramedics that sit next to the cage. You can be a ringside doctor. You can be a commissioner. There's so many things that you can do. You don't have to be a cut man or a fighter, you know? And so that's what I'm saying. When you bring up the mental aspect, like, I want to know your take because, bro, like, you're dealing with stuff. Like, life throws a lot at you. So what makes you get up in the morning? What makes you smile? What makes you stop from just saying the hell with it, I give up? You know, life itself is a fight. And that's what I think, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't really, man, I love the guys. I love them. They're amazing. But I can't talk about being a fighter because I never was a fighter. But I can tell you what life is. You know, I can tell you what I've experienced, you know. I can tell you owning a trucking company that's not doing well, you know, that's what it is, bro. So I liken it to that. You know, can you keep going? Can you wake up every day? Can you keep trying to find positivity when there's nothing positive?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that side too. And I think you're right. I think there's more, there's more to life than just being a professional athlete. And at the end of the day, no matter what you do, everything requires kind of your best effort, whether, like you said, it's being an athlete or just being a student or working, any job that you're passionate about. And everything's going to come with its own obstacles and challenges. And there's no way to avoid it. So I think, to your point as well, it's just about building yourself up to a place where you can be resilient and kind of sustain those ups and downs. But it circles back to what you said earlier of what you noticed in all these champions is they have a really solid team around them. And I think it's the same thing with us. I mean, like you said, you have 100,000 followers. It's a lot of people to nitpick on all these little details and to troll and whatever, but it's really the 5 to 6 to 12 closest people that you have that really, those are the people you really care about, right? If those people are giving you the criticisms, like, okay, maybe I need to look at something and, whatever the case may be. It's the same thing with these fighters, right? These fighters that have 10K followers, 100K, millions of followers. It's just more people, more eyeballs, more fans, but also more trolls. And sometimes you have to bring it into your team and say, okay, I've got my team around me who I trust with everything I've got. They trust me. I'm going to take what they say at face value, but that's it. And having that core circle. So I think, to your point, in whatever you do, whether it's being an athlete or anything, having your team, whatever that looks like, even if it's not a sports team or it's coaches, it's just people that you can rely on and people you trust and people that trust you, where you have that relationship with them, but it allows you to separate the opinions of the closest people to you instead of just the strangers that think that they're entitled to be able to say something about you because they've seen you on TV and think that they know you. Okay, little update. Looks like we've lost Brad, guys. We've lost Brad. He's driving through the middle of Texas right now, and I guess his service is bad. So I really appreciate the things that he said. I think there's a lot to learn, both on the cut man side of it and just kind of what the job entails, but also kind of the personal stuff he was sharing. Again, he doesn't have the insights of being in the ring fighting, but he is, everything you can get that's not that, which is being right up there until the point that they go in. And I also really appreciated him sharing kind of the personal things of what he's going through and how he manages it. So I'm really excited that we got to have Brad on for as long as we did until the service cut out. We're definitely going to do a part 2. So send in any questions that you have, for Brad, knowing what you know now, and I'll be happy to pass it on and make sure that we touch on that next time. So thanks a lot for watching. As always, go ahead and take a look at his social media, Instagram. It's really funny. And again, thanks for listening. Thanks for being on this ride with us, and see you soon.